Right, we're back. I remember that I accidentally went through 2 turns last time, so... here we are for real. Um... So, there is quite a bit to do, and only so much time to do it. Okay. We've got more text to research, specifically communism, which, if it has the same code space game, which I don't remember if it does, that's going to be an interesting way to start it. Right, put you back here. Start mining the copper up there. Great. So the plan is to start working myself towards the point where I can actually invade Sue. Because once that happens, hopefully then the pirate ships will stop. Anyway, let's have Tafuna be the garbage collection agency. We can drop it into the volcano. What could possibly go wrong? I'm well aware of how many ways that can go wrong. Maybe not the nitty-gritty details of every single one of them, but I'm very certain that such a thought has occurred to people before, and we've already learned long ago why it hasn't come up that often since. Okay. Yep. And these buildings put together should be all the ones that have good efficiency. Right, since you just built the hydro plant, I presume that your efficiency is going to be interesting. Reptiles aren't... Okay, so the traction engine workshop is very good, so is the chalk gap. But you found a modern earthworks anyway. These are the camps, which I can't really do because of other reasons. The iron mine is way too expensive to be reasonable. And the levy kind of is too. The steam crane... okay, oil refinery is actually at efficiency. Same with the modern crane, the parts plant as well. But the manufacturing plant is first. Because of course it is. And then we do that. Okay. It's going to take a while for anything further to happen, so... there really isn't much of a reason for me to do any of that. Okay, is there anything with good efficiency? Yes. I think that might have been it. Yep, okay. Lovely. Those buildings take a while to build, so I can come back to it later. Okay. Right. University, and before that, the ancient customs, the carpenter, the lumber camp, bamboo grove. That's it, really, for the moment. Okay, university, before that, ancient customs, carpenter, lumber camp. That's it, okay. Probably should have expected as much. Alright, modern mine. Right, I need a minute, so that might... I'll be back in a moment, don't worry. Something else that's just caught my attention for the moment. That's also quite important. Okay, that should be fine for now. Yep, okay. Great spy.
When I give food to the poor, they call me a saint. When I ask why the poor have no food, they call me a communist.
So, communism. That's a fun thing to talk about. Partially because of the fact that it's kind of difficult to define what exactly it is, due to the sheer number of ways that people have defined it, misdefined it, redefined it to match their own needs, especially people who don't call themselves communists, and also people who do call themselves communists. It's extra fun. The varying ways in which things differ. But as to the answer, what communism is, it's actually fairly stringent. It is an economic system that has no money, no classes, and no state. The fun part is, what are all those things? And that's where things get difficult. Especially when you start considering that certain people have an interest in defining it in certain ways. Like a lot of committed communists define communism very differently compared to anti-communists. Again, everyone has their own reasons for doing this, but there's a lot of problems involved with that. But in order to actually be communist, it must fulfill that in some specific way. Well, sort of. You could argue that there exist tribal societies that work like that, and that tends to get referred to as primitive communism. Scotland Yard. Can only be built by a great spy. But yeah, money I have already talked about a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but definitely a few times. It is a medium of exchange that denotes some sort of metaphorical value by putting it into a physical object that's easy to exchange with another person. It's really that simple what it is, but it's also extremely complicated because the fact of the matter is that it's abstract what it's worth. Because in so many circumstances, what we're trading doesn't actually have physical value. Like, stuff is shiny. There's sometimes nothing more to it in what makes it valuable. I'm not going to have interesting side effects. In what comes out of it. But yeah, it's supposed to be moneyless. That means that any exchange that is done is plain and simple, does not have any sort of physical currency attached to it. It can be a metaphysical currency, be more precise. It can use a non-currency like reputation. Like, people won't deal with you if, for example, you're untrustworthy, or people feel that you're untrustworthy, etc. Or you can keep track of transfers that have been made in the past, debt-based economies. Or, just not bother with all that keeping track and do a gift economy. It varies. By dint of technicality, barter is also a non-currency economy, but barter doesn't really happen outside of cases where currencies have fallen apart and become regular old money has, for one reason or another, become invalid, usually because of hyperinflation. Or massive amounts of deflation. That can also do the thing too. Alright, build a tree farm. It's gonna be one of the few good tiles in the city, so definitely should put it to work. At least until I start building ice factories. Those buildings are pretty high value, so just go ahead and build them now. Okay, then parking garage. These are a bit pricey, so roads. That way I can get the road signs. I should also get the modern waterworks so I can get the gondola canals as well. There. Classless. Yeah, so let's go. So, moneyless, stateless, classless. Let's go with classless. Classless means that there are no social hierarchies in place. This one is a bit more of a difficult one. Huh, I've got a great admiral. Neat. This one's a bit more of a difficult one because, well, social classes. There are varying degrees of social classes in place. The most extreme tend to be fully hereditary. The caste system is a very famous version of this. Technically, no country practices that anymore. In all practicality, India has issues with that. Severe issues. In how the caste system, despite technically not existing, it still persists within the country's society, which has all kinds of negative consequences on their country. The class systems don't need to be so thorough, genetically speaking. There are, Europe used to have, and in some places still does, the UK is still an example of this, a system of hereditary aristocrats. Which have special privileges associated with them that they have simply due to who they were born to. But unlike with the caste system, unlike with the proper caste system, you are allowed to marry in between groupings. Legally speaking, it's not going to be shunned or, anything like that. Although you might get looked at a bit oddly. Or generally dismissed by the upper classes, or even the lower classes, depending on the situation. The best way to demonstrate this is that, let's see here, Poland-Lithuania, I'm sure some of you have heard of that. Yeah, they had the system called Librum Veto, in which, well, there was a sort of Senate-like grouping, which held legislative power similar to the English Parliament, the House of Lords. In fact, it's pretty close to an exact equivalent at the time. There's the aircraft settler. However, there was also a system called the Librum Veto, in which any voter, any individual that was a voting member, i.e. had noble blood, could run in, shout that he, because, had to be a man, because of course, could shout that he opposed this legislation and was using his veto, and then boom, nothing could happen. The real interesting bit is that over time, because voting rights could not be taken away by your birth, only granted by having some sort of noble parentage, or, noble ancestry, over time, suffrage of this kind slowly expanded until you got to the point where everyone, well, not everyone, but about a quarter of Poland's population, it was either a quarter of Poland's male population or full population, actually had voting rights. Which just goes to show how the fact that Europe just didn't have nearly as strong of restrictions on, well, who could marry who and all that. Which actually did help somewhat with the slow development of egalitarianism within. Although it still took time. But of course, it took time. And we still have classes today, social classes. There is more mobility than ever before, but it's still not, well, there's still limits, and admittedly, by today I mean past 100 years. Mobility has been slow between classes has been slowly but surely decreasing. It's becoming more and more difficult for a person to move from one social class to another, both up and down. Although generally it's more important to focus on the upwards mobility rather than downwards mobility. As I must admit, the fact that downwards mobility exists is quite gives a slight bit of catharsis depending on the situation. Although there not being as much downward mobility is also quite bad because it means that there's no mechanism for people to leave the class. Which can in fact have some really bad consequences depending on the situation. Oh, well, it really does depend on the situation. Okay, right. I believe the best process to do this by is just get through all the initial ones, because by now the algorithm does not change. For the time being. The agroforest might adjust things in the near future. Whoops. Sorry. I was doing something else for a moment. Okay, I'm back. But yeah, we still live under a class system. You've got the very wealthy, the wealthiest people at the very tippy top, with various groupings depending on what it is they own and control. They are in effect, and have been since the rise of liberalism, I'd say, the tippy top, and they're often called the bourgeoisie, which is merely French for burghers. So, which itself means rich city dwellers. They used to be the middle class at one point, but they've managed to overthrow the old aristocracy, at least in Europe they did, and install themselves as the new upper class. There is of course still portions of the old middle class that exist. These are the rich city dwellers that aren't actually rich anymore, but still do stuff that the old middle class did back in the Middle Ages. Trade, small stores, and whatnot. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
I reject your reality and substitute my own.
Nice to get a bit of extra culture from the art gallery. Of course, they are the economic upper class. There's also another aspect of the upper class, the political upper class. So politicians, etc. They have their own aspects to them that adjust things. The calculus, so to speak. And they have their own influences and whatnot. And there's a lot of interplay between the political upper class and the economic upper class. After all, much of the wealth of the political upper class comes from bribes, or corruption, or whatnot, from the other portions of the upper class. Usually the bourgeoisie. However, there are still the old aristocrats still strumming about in a few places. Although it depends on the area. There are, after all, limits. Okay, so where do I want to plant the next city? I mean, I think... Yeah, there is some spots in Neonesia that could see some settlement, but there aren't many. I could do it right in the middle of the desert. But that means no river. Or I could do it over here, but that's pretty close to August. Then again, over here is also pretty close to Irai. Honestly, I think down here might be the best spot. I'm still within reach of all this stuff, and well, I can't reach all the way up here. Maybe not. Okay, the desert isn't particularly useful. Perhaps something to be reserved for another time? And maybe I should start heading towards the southern bits again. Yeah. Let's go to the southern continent portion that's actually useful. So not this one, the other one. Yep, the one down here. Now it is pretty close to Sue's territory, so it's perfect, really. After that's done, I can move the transport ship to where I've been keeping my army. It's only been paused because I've been looking at other stuff for the time being, including working on tech. Yeah, there's still the old landed aristocracy in place, and although it depends on the area, a lot of them have genuinely died out or sort of faded away. Or moved into becoming, or well, maybe not moved, adapted into becoming a new part of the, well, the bourgeoisie. Farming consortiums and the like are a possibility. Of course, I could have just gone with a regular old company. Similar to some other groups. It depends, really. Get these and these out of the way. Yeah. Save anything more for later. Okay, you already have the trading post built, so I don't actually need to build the university. Oh dear. Below, so that's pretty much what that is. Especially with how, well, there is also a cultural elite, but they are largely controlled by the bourgeoisie. Similar with the political elite. Celebrities and whatnot. Which city was that? I do not actually know. The exact nature of the territory is unfamiliar to me. Municipal... municipal computing engine. Okay, that's the last one of them. Yep, okay. It's Caves. Alright, get back to what to just sleeping. Yeah. But most of them are controlled because well, with the bourgeoisie, I'd say, owns about 90% of the media. And the concept, well, at least, maybe? Honestly, exact numbers aren't really that important. But they own a large portion of it, that's for sure. And cultural elites usually get their presence, well, their power is usually through media, so. Well, they can also express opinions against that, and, well, let me put it this way. Having diversity of opinion does make it look fairer. Anyway, the middle classes, I've already mentioned the old middle class. They're kind of left behind, one of the leftovers, just like the aristocrats from previous eras. And they're a bit cranky about it, to put it simply. A bit cranky might be underselling it, honestly. They're definitely a very central source of well, reactionary movements. Okay, I need you to head to here. And then I need to start collecting ships. Okay, let's get through these temples. It'll be quick. Don't worry about it. Okay, you also need a courthouse and a hospital. The courthouse is going to be fairly far up, right? Presumably, I don't see it though. That's mine. There it is, okay. You can ever get replaced? No, not really. Okay, then engineering school, then factory. There's also the new middle class, which is, well, it's a very volatile grouping, I must say. Honestly, no matter the system, the middle class is fairly unstable. Because it displays a level that there's some mobility between lower and upper class, but the classes still exist. And that's actually quite unstable of a system. Because it's in the interest of the upper class to ensure that there's as little mobility as possible, because it means that their position is secure no matter what dumb things they do. And the lower classes want it to be as mobile as possible, because then they actually have a chance of getting out of their awful situation. Or at least then it's decently likely the world isn't just a playground for the upper class, which it is turning into, but that's beyond the point. But the new middle class is, I guess, skilled labor might be a way to describe it. It's certainly a poor way to, though. There's no such thing as unskilled labor. Labor is labor. Anything you can figure out if, so long as you put your mind to it, just about any sort of hard labor or repetitive task in a few days. Trickier things take more time, but rarely do you need to spend more than a year training for a new job. And I say this as someone that studied university to turn into an office worker. Woo. Yeah, it's unstable though, as I said. The fact that mobility exists. But yeah, the middle class, what it is, varies. So much more than the other two. Like, the upper class, had religious leaders come in and then leave. Well, it started off being religious and political elite. Then, once feudalism started rolling about, and economics started to become more and more important, there was a fused, well, you know, there was a constant attempt towards merging with the political elite by the economic elite, and the religious elite did that as well. They're the old version of the cultural elite. The new cultural elite are secular and don't rely on religious power, well, any sort of religion, in order to exert their influence. Instead, just use culture, exert their influence through culture. But the new middle class nowadays, yeah, mainly office workers. And the fact that they're still called workers is indicative of how precarious their position is. Because a lot of the reason why they're considered middle class is because they have a reasonable amount of wealth under their belt as well. But that can only go for so long, right? Once, if for one reason or another, the skills they provide are no longer in demand, then their income crashes. It's that easy. And their position in the social hierarchy falls apart. In fact, that is, to an extent, what is being attempted right at this moment with various office workers and AI. Although to some degree, office work is kind of busy work anyway. A lot of it isn't really necessary. But I'm digressing a lot. Then there's the lower classes, the people that generally do most of the work in society. Generally speaking, there's a lot of variation on what exactly happens, of course. There always is. Because they do different things. Oh. Yeah, this is part of the cultural borders simply because of the town. I may as well road it though, so I can come back to it later. I mean, and the lower classes have shifted over time to urban workers are an old thing, but the idea of them being part of the lower class rather than the middle class, because most urban workers once upon a time were craftsmen, guild workers and whatnot, who owned the means, well, who basically owned the tools they used to make things, or at least did so with guilds indirectly. They were part of the guild that owned it, to put it a different way. 6, 7, 8, 9. Yep, all of them can fit. Okay. Yep. The rest here, there's 8 of them, so in theory I could grab another. Oh, good lord, not again. Good thing I caught the ship this time. You. Do I have another ship nearby? Not nearby, sadly. Boat, 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 boat. Okay. Space shuttle is doing stuff. You're sitting there. Okay. So these are all the units sitting in a city. Okay, so there's 2 over here for some reason. Why are you sitting there? No, that's just number 2. Okay. I'll wait a turn, just to be sure, so I can land them immediately. On a convenient spot. But yes, urban workers being part of the lower classes has basically been a thing since the Industrial Revolution, when factories started becoming a thing. And the guild system started to get demolished through that. Beyond that, there are also the rural workers, which are have a long storied history. And some groups think that that makes them inherently reactionary. Ha, no. It can be under certain situations, but it's never, ever guaranteed. Sometimes it could be more revolutionary than you think. But yes, yeah, and below the lower classes there are often the undesirables. Nowadays, they are the homeless, the unemployed, and a few lower class workers that are considered to be very, very on the dregs of society. And I mean very. Common occurrences, well, common options. What do I say? Okay, so yeah. Well, I think the biggest and easiest example would be prostitutes. They're very, very looked down upon in most societies. And it's very easy for a lot of people to look down on them too. Although I do believe in Marxist theory, the farm workers are under that grouping too. I believe the correct term is lumpen proletariat. The lumpy workers, or the other workers that aren't revolutionary, but I'm digressing a lot with that. Okay. So a classless society implies that these classes are gone. Everyone has social equality. They aren't considered differently based upon who they were born to or what they do. You know, what their jobs are, etc. So any major aspects of their identity aren't all that important, at least when it comes to general respect, how they're treated, etc. Of course, different people have different needs. So, based upon those needs, they should be treated differently. You're not going to give the lactose, you should not give, you should not give lactose intolerant people ice cream as a treat. That goes poorly. Very poorly. For a lot of reasons. But yeah, that's essentially what it means. Plus no economic advantages, etc. And politically speaking, everyone should be equal. What we have right now is one of the best we had in recorded history, but it's still rather limited. Because the outsized influence that certain people have is a lot more invisible. It's certainly there, but it's harder to notice. And land, and head on back to here. And move to here. This is going to be the trickiest engagement yet. After all, these cities have actual infrastructure. You are currently researching explosives. Yeah, they're in Renaissance. I'm only 2 ages ahead, unlike Persia, who was still in ancient era when I finished, or Hattusa, or Hatti, which was medieval era. Explosives are right here, and I think I remember saying them. No, maybe liberalism? I don't know. They're definitely in the later portions of Renaissance era, though. Okay, back to what I was talking about. Yeah. So, political equality, social equality, and economic equality. Of course, this does not mean absolute equality. As I already said, people have different needs and different wants. Again, you should not give, ice cream to someone who's lactose intolerant, and you probably also shouldn't give it to someone who does not like ice cream. Save it for the people that actually want ice cream. You have to take into account the fact that people have different wants and needs. And indulge them, so long as it doesn't get in the way of other people indulging as well. There, of course, should be limits. But where those limits lie depends on the resource situation. Beyond that, stateless. Now here's the fun bit. What is a state? Because there are multiple ways to define it, some of which are a bit more arcane and, dare I say it, less realistic than others. The general Marxist definition is that the state is a tool for one class to oppress another. Therefore, the state ceases to exist once there are no social classes. In effect, according to Marxism, okay, focus on bombarding. Until the walls are broken down, it is impossible to do much of anything there. Telling me this also isn't an in-city influence? The heck? Do larger towns exert larger influence? Despite the best intentions, then, the postmodernist politics of difference not only is ineffective against, but can even coincide with and support the functions and practices of imperial rule. The danger is that postmodernist theories focus their attention so resolutely on the old forms of power they are running from, with their heads turned backwards, that they tumble unwittingly into the welcoming arms of the new power. Postmodernism is a bit odd. And maybe I'll talk about it later, but yeah. Let's legalize gambling! What could possibly go wrong? Okay, let's do the folklore if it's there. I need to remember that it's been ages since I've found any new creatures, so... Actually, let's give you movement range. Letting you travel farther means you can gather more XP by fighting more animals. Especially once I've started dealing with the newly colonized portions. Oh, postmodernism. Okay. Yeah, it just gives me... Okay. I'll take it then. Yeah. Where was I? Yeah. Basically, under a classical Marxist thinking, once classes disappear, then the state no longer exists. In other words, as soon as everyone identifies themselves as part of the same class, with no other changes to the social situation, economic situation, etc. Yeah. Okay, this is probably oversimplifying it, but this is approximately the case. In effect, if you have a worker state, and you manage to replace all the capitalist states in the world with worker states, then there are no more worker states. You have a free, liberated world. Even if all the political administrations are massive dictatorships that call the shots, it's still not a state. This is, of course, rather ridiculous. And again, I am oversimplifying matters to some extent. Yeah, I need to do a bunch of bombarding in order to get those down. And out for the count. Yeah, orchard, I guess. Titanium smelter. Oh, someone got an upgrade. It's you. I'm still going to bombard for a while, because I don't think the units can attack the city just yet. Unless I can with 100% or something. Then there's no reason not to attack the city. Because really, why wouldn't I? Yeah, like that. How many units are here mounted? Right, there's town watchmen sitting in there. Oh, you can't attack anymore. Okay. Right, these amphibious APCs don't have bullets. You rest. I'm gonna use you in order to help with city production once I've captured the city. Yeah, sure. Why not leave it at that? So yeah, I honestly am definitely going to lean more towards the anarchist definition of a state, in which a state is, well, okay, yeah. The anarchist definition is probably the one that's most useful and also most accurate. It is a political tool of minority rule over a majority. In other words, it is effectively a means for a small group of people to exert power over a large group, usually through force. Missed its target. Shrapnel shower. Of course, metal lumber mill. It's resin. Resin's amazing. Little tree farm. Oh. Wait, there was a chance of not going through? Okay, there's still 73 medicine men left in the city. Good lord, the sheer numbers involved. But yeah, the anarchist definition is simply that. Which is fairly effective and also implies that you can't have, say, a worker state. Because, you know, the lower classes obviously make up the majority of the population. But I'm digressing a lot. The garbage collection agency isn't finished yet, but it's getting there, I presume. Bombard. You already maxed out your urban tactics? No, you don't. Okay. Lost flanking 2 and 3. Sketchy urban tactics. You know what? Nah, I don't need a ranged assault. Still probably a good idea. Of course, I mean, there are other ways to define the state, but yeah. Though I do feel that out of all the ideologies that promote specifically communism or can promote communism, anarchism is particularly diverse. So But there are quite a few. I mean, well, anarcho-communism, I believe, is the largest tendency of anarchism. So, hey, I know you're really far away, but how about heading over here to help? Oh, can't have that happening. The fortification's coming back online. Yeah, the sheer number of units is a bit ridiculous. That's the fact I need to get over here without, oh, that's fine. If you're going through that, then I'm sure that's gonna work out just fine. Although, there. Oh, you're here too. Neat. Let's get you some vision range and you can start heading over here. But yeah, there are really just two major groups that specifically want to strive for them. Okay, three, but I'm going to say that the primitivists are kind of weird, unpopular, and an edge case ahead of time, so. Wait, that's Honolulu. Oops. But yeah, out of the two major groups, I'd say that the definition of the state that most tracks with people's general intuition would happen to be that one. But yeah, there are plenty of definitions. Another fairly interesting one is, does it really take that many steps to get across the ocean? Apparently. Yeah, you really don't like ocean travel, do you? Huh. I thought you ignored terrain movement costs, but apparently you don't. Oh, jeez. Do you have nothing better to do than to... what should I do? Yeah, just combat. Straight combat is usually the best option. Okay, yeah, the cultural borders have spread, so... Yeah, these areas should be now safe from barb spawn, this portion of the continent. This portion is still dangerous, but we can get to that later. Yeah, I mean, there are other definitions and political signs that are interesting for the state, such as um, the entity with the with the monopoly on legitimate use of violence. So in other words, the entity that within the territory they control is the only one allowed to use violence in order to see their goals met. Which is also a very interesting definition. That's why sovereignty is such a big deal to states. Because it means they're the only one that can use violence in the area. And that's part of the reason why it's so important to them. There you go. Right. This wonder of nature is going to get me quite a bit. Especially of gold. But, well, even here the mining cap. No, actually. The wonder of nature comes first. Inefficiency. Wow. That's unusual. The lava rock gatherer is part of the modern earthworks, so... Comparative. I might be able to plant lumber around here somewhere. I mean, the tundra might. Definitely not the permafrost. So, you know, I'm gonna wait on that. I need to go to the capital and have it set up some unit creation. Okay, so I need a big game hunter, which will probably be somewhere around the end of the list. There you are, okay. Let me also provide you with a defensive weapon of tank and a worker. Which of course is more expensive than I think, isn't it? Next worker. There you are, okay. That'll take a few turns, but the city won't really do much for a few turns anyway. I don't actually need Mammoth Hunter. You can take down any mammoths on your own just fine. At least that confirms I can build cities on ice now. Perhaps I always could. I don't know, generally it's not a good idea to do that. But there's not very many other locations for me to settle on, so... Okay, let's handle those olives. Yeah. Of course, yeah, I need a speed run. Misdefinitions usually involve trying to take away popularity, or by calling it when the state does everything. Although I think that one was originally a joke. That, like so many jokes mocking the right wingers, they adopted it as their calling card. Annoying. But yeah, okay. So this turn and the next, and then we're finished. Okay, so I already got the really important stuff out of the way. For food buildings. Okay, you can level up. You probably could use combat. And sleep. Perhaps I should have bombarded first. There we go. Tire recycling initiative. Right. Okay. After that, I'm gonna have to pick tech too. Oh, great. I think it might be time to bite the bullet and grab fascism.
Let it ride.
Okay. I have no idea what that refers to. Oh yeah, you can already tell. Science production must have exploded at some point. To the point where, things have gotten very, very far. I need biological warfare so I can start looking into biology. Yeah. I think the next thing to gun for should be genetics. And then I can focus towards, you know, the top bits here. Then do amphibious warfare, modern sports. In effect, putting off modern computing as long as possible. Well, personal computers as long as possible. While leaving some open for free text from wonders. Fine, orchid. Right, you've done the biology lab. Okay. Still retreat to do. Yeah, you need combat 1. Especially since for the time being I'm unlikely to actually fight gunpowder units. Anti-tank defense. Ooh. Another perhaps, though. For now, the best thing to go for is urban tactics. So we can do a better job of hacking away at cities. Ahem! We still have you to go through. Select all, and put to sleep. Oh hey, you're here too. Oh shoot, okay, start of next turn, we'll stop. So, that was a long talk. But very fitting. I didn't even talk about the Soviet Union. Perhaps another time on that one. I mean, like I already said, I think I've already talked about my opinion of the Soviet Union in Crisis in the Kremlin, the Cold War. So anyone that wants to know can just look at that specifically. Because I do have some very strong opinions about the Soviet Union. Yeah, I should be good for the moment for Kitty. Okay, I won't even touch cities. Not even. I will have to do something like about this though. Okay, so oh, no. Okay, let me get a tank in here. And rush. I mean, I have tons of... my treasury is doing great. I have not had issues for the past several episodes, even with the increase in cities. So that's probably a sign of things going... Yeah, I saw that. You're not going to pull a fast one on me that easily. Oh. Fine, I'll do a bit. Okay, okay. I'm gonna stop that. Because inevitably I'll end up playing another turn. So yeah, I actually went through 3 texts this time. Because the texts are going through faster. There are fewer turns, but I'm still doing quite a bit. So overall, I am playing less and less turns per session. But things are going fairly well. I'm still putting off personal computers because it's going to cause complications with my science output. Even though all these texts here are going to help with science in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, not much I can do about it. I am going to get a new great person around the same time I research fascism. Well, isn't that interesting? Oh, so that's how I got the great spy. I'll get a great general once I get fascism. Yeah, I'm going to grab guerrilla warfare and then because I need that for biological warfare and I need that for molecular biology and then I can research genetics. And then, well, stuff. I don't think I can build the seed vault because latitude is broken. Although I don't need that minus 50% accuracy for sacrifice population. Why is that in there? The +1 food from scientists would have been nice, but yeah. Latitudes are broken with the space map. Like, in order to actually have a latitude of 50, I need to go around here-ish. And there's just no ice here. Well, okay, I don't need to go that far. Yeah, you just need to go to... We just gotta put the seed vault in trans-solar space beyond the Oort cloud. South's also broken too, I think. Yep. Yep. The bottom of the map is 14 degrees south. It's, yeah. It's just how the map is. There's no other way to make it fit. And so the wonder is kind of broken. Yeah. So once I've done with genetic stuff, I'll probably do these ones up here. Gastronomy, hydroponics, counterculture, minority rights. Extreme sports is going to require modern sports, so that might take a minute. And then there's urban culture, which has uh-huh. You know, maybe I don't need the thing. Okay, so I might put it off a bit longer. Urban culture. I'm still going to need Coast Guard and Amphibious Warfare at some point, so that's going to be something to do. But yeah, I've... That's actually too far. Over here, I've settled a new city. Yaxmutal, which already built the natural wonder thing. Wonder of nature, Sopka. Because the thing actually produces more production than the mining camp, at least on a cost basis. Which is fascinating. And very helpful because it does other stuff too. Beyond that, I also settled a city. No, this is the wrong spot. Up here. Yep. And I think I'm going to slow down on city settling for a while. I need to set up the units necessary for the city over here, because I haven't actually done that yet. I need a hunter in order to hunt any animals that wander around the area. I doubt there's going to be many. And then a worker, and then also an MBT in order to protect the worker. I mean, it doesn't need to be an MBT, but that's funny. It's funnier that way. I am worried about this modern infantry running around. It might actually take down the big game hunter. And I haven't invested in any withdrawal for you. I certainly hope you don't end up... Because there's quite a few units here that you don't see otherwise. Anyway, I've definitely gone on long enough. I'll see you again next time. Until then.